They said money could buy everything, comfort, power, even love. But Ethan Ward had learned the cruel truth. Money could build walls so high, even love couldn't climb them. The morning he decided to pretend he was paralyzed, he wasn't searching for pity. He was searching for truth. The kind of truth that strips everything away, leaving nothing but what's real. He wanted to know if Isabella loved him, or the empire he had built. What he didn't know was that love was already waiting for him, quiet, unpolished, and wrapped in the gentle strength of someone he never noticed. Because sometimes, the ones who love us the most are the ones we see the least. Do you believe love can find us when we least expect it? Tell me what you think. Ethan Ward was a man who had everything, except peace. His face had graced magazine covers. His company, Ward Dynamics, was a titan of innovation. Skyscrapers bore his name, and people whispered it with a strange mixture of envy and awe. But behind his success was a man hollowed out by doubt. Every handshake felt rehearsed. Every smile came with a price tag. And lately, even the woman he planned to marry felt transactional. Isabella Sinclair. Flawless. Elegant. Breathtaking in a way that made people forget how cold her eyes could be. She was the kind of woman who drew attention without asking for it. And Ethan had fallen, hard and fast. Their love, if it could be called that, began at a gala. She'd brushed his arm, laughed softly at his awkward attempt at charm, and within weeks, the media had christened them the perfect couple. But perfection was a fragile disguise. When the cameras stopped flashing, Ethan saw the distance in her gaze. How her laughter dimmed when he spoke about slowing down, stepping away from business, or giving to charity instead of expanding. Her dreams always involved more luxury, more travel, more headlines. Still, he convinced himself it was love. Because it hurt too much to think otherwise. Then came the accident. A car crash on a rain-slick road. Headlights. Screeching metal. When he woke in the hospital, the doctors told him he'd survived, but he might never walk again. For the first time in years, the world went quiet. No meetings. No shareholders. No cameras. Just him, and the woman who claimed to love him. At first, Isabella was devoted. She sat by his bedside, her manicured fingers stroking his hand, her voice sugar-sweet. But as days turned to weeks, and weeks to months, her visits grew shorter. Her sighs heavier. Her phone, always buzzing with new invitations. Ethan saw it all. And with every passing day, his heart sank deeper into doubt. Until one night, when he overheard her in the hallway, whispering to someone, her tone sharp, impatient. "I can't live like this. He's not the man I agreed to marry. He's broken." The words hit him harder than the crash ever had. But then, just as despair threatened to swallow him whole, another voice entered his life. Her name was Naomi Carter. She was the new maid hired through an agency when the household staff shifted schedules. A quiet woman with kind eyes and skin that glowed like warmth itself. She moved with purpose, her steps soft, her presence grounded. At first, Ethan barely noticed her. He was too wrapped in pain, physical and emotional. But Naomi noticed him. The way he clenched his jaw when no one was looking. The way his eyes followed the window light, longing for something he couldn't reach. She noticed, and she cared. It started small. A gentle word here, a cup of tea placed by his hand before he even asked. Music humming softly from her phone while she dusted the edges of his world. And when she thought he was asleep, she prayed for him, quietly, under her breath. Something about that broke him. Because no one had prayed for him in years. One evening, while Isabella was out at another social event, Naomi found him staring at the rain. He didn't speak, but she stepped closer, holding a folded blanket. Her voice was calm, unhurried. "It's getting cold, Mr. Ward." For the first time in weeks, he turned to look at someone not as a patient or a businessman, but as a man. And what he saw in her eyes wasn't pity. It was compassion. That night, when she left the room, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she saw him. Really saw him. In the days that followed, Naomi became his quiet anchor. She never overstepped, never asked for more than a smile or a thank you. But she listened. And Ethan found himself talking about the noise of his old life, the emptiness of wealth, the loneliness of success. And she listened like his words mattered. Like he mattered. One afternoon, Isabella walked in unexpectedly to find them laughing softly over a story about Naomi's grandmother. Her eyes flashed cold. The tension sliced through the room like glass. Naomi quickly excused herself, but Isabella's voice followed her out, dripping with disdain. "She's the help, Ethan. Try to remember that." The words burned him. Not because of what she said, but because of how easily she said it. And for the first time, Ethan began to question everything. Was this the woman he wanted to spend his life with? Someone who measured worth by wealth, and love by appearances? That night, a decision began to form, a reckless, painful, necessary one. If he wanted truth, he'd have to create it. He'd have to test the love around him, even if it shattered the illusion completely. He would pretend to still be paralyzed. Even after the doctors told him he might walk again with therapy, he'd hide the progress. He'd hide the truth, just to see who would stay, and who would leave. The next morning, he signed the discharge papers, returning home with a secret that would define everything. Isabella saw a man confined to a wheelchair. Naomi saw a man still standing inside. And somewhere between them, love was waiting to be revealed, raw, painful, and real. If you were in his place, would you stay or walk away? I'd love to read your thoughts. The mansion felt colder after Ethan's return. It wasn't the winter air that chilled the hallways, it was the silence that followed him wherever he went. He moved through his home like a ghost of himself, wheels whispering against marble floors polished to perfection. Every movement reminded him of the lie he had chosen. He could feel strength returning to his legs, small sparks of motion that burned with promise. But he hid them. He hid everything. The doctor's words echoed in his mind, "With therapy, you'll walk again." But Ethan wasn't ready for that. He needed to know who truly loved him when he could offer nothing in return. Days turned into weeks, and the test began quietly. Isabella visited less often. Her once sweet greetings became rushed, her kisses on his cheek mechanical. She brought friends sometimes, women who whispered in corners and pitted him behind glossy lips. Ethan watched them all, smiling faintly, saying little. He was observing, measuring hearts. But Naomi, she was constant. Each morning, her voice arrived before the light did. She moved through the mansion with purpose, humming soft hymns that somehow made the air lighter. Her kindness didn't change when others were watching. It didn't shift with mood or circumstance. When she helped him dress, she never made him feel weak. When she cooked, she brought flavors that felt like home, warm spices, soft bread, gentle laughter when he complimented the food he claimed not to want. Ethan started looking forward to her presence more than he admitted to himself. She didn't know he could already stand, that at night, when the house was asleep, he practiced walking alone in the dim glow of the hallway lights. Each step a secret. Each secret, a confession to himself. He was healing. But not from the accident, from the illusion of love. One afternoon, Isabella came home early, her voice echoing through the marble foyer. She was on the phone, her tone sharp, impatient. "I told you, I can't keep pretending. He's like a child now. No dinners, no parties, no life." The words sank into him like poison. He remained still, behind the half-open door, watching her reflection in the mirror across the hall. She looked radiant, a woman perfectly dressed, perfectly detached. For a long time, Ethan said nothing. Then, when she noticed him watching, her tone changed instantly, soft, practiced concern. "Oh, darling, I didn't know you were there. I was just worried about us." He smiled, nodding gently, though inside, something cracked beyond repair. That night, Naomi found him sitting in the study long after midnight. The fire had burned down to embers, its glow flickering across his face. She didn't speak. She simply placed a blanket across his shoulders and began to tidy the room in silence. He watched her hands, graceful, steady, strong. Hands that knew real work, not performance. And something in him began to ache with gratitude he couldn't name. Days passed, and his world split in two. By day, he was the broken billionaire, confined and silent. By night, he was the man rediscovering himself, walking the halls with trembling legs and quiet strength. One evening, as he practiced near the staircase, Naomi entered without warning. Her eyes widened as she saw him standing. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan's voice broke the silence, rough and low. "You weren't supposed to see this." Naomi's expression didn't change. She stepped closer, her gaze steady, kind. "I'm glad I did," she said softly. And that was all. No judgment. No questions. Just acceptance. For the first time in months, Ethan didn't feel ashamed of his lie. He felt understood. From that night on, Naomi became his quiet ally. She helped him strengthen his legs in secret, massaging muscles that still trembled under his weight, holding his arm when he faltered. Every touch was professional, yet deeply human, a connection that reminded him of everything real love was supposed to be. Isabella never noticed. She was too busy chasing the next charity gala, the next headline. Her world revolved around being seen, while Ethan's world shrank into the corners where Naomi's presence glowed. Then came the night that changed everything. Isabella returned from a weekend away. She burst through the doors in designer heels and perfume that filled the room like smoke. Ethan waited in his chair, the lie still intact. She smiled, radiant and hollow. But when her phone rang, she turned her back to him, her laughter soft, intimate. And Ethan recognized the tone, the same tone she once used on him. He listened, every word cutting deeper than the last. "I miss you too," she whispered. "He won't even know I'm gone tomorrow night. He barely notices anything these days." When she hung up, Ethan said nothing. He simply watched her, eyes quiet, mind calm, like the moment before a storm breaks. He knew, then, that his test was over. The answer was clear. Isabella had failed. But Naomi had passed without ever knowing she was being tested. That night, Ethan made a decision that would unravel everything. He would reveal the truth. He would walk again, not just to prove his recovery, but to reclaim his life. And he would do it in front of both women. One who pretended to love him. And one who unknowingly taught him what love really meant. As he stared into the mirror, his reflection no longer looked like a man broken by fate. It looked like a man reborn by truth. The test had begun as a lie. But it would end as his liberation. If you were Naomi, seeing a man hide his pain, hide his strength, and test love itself, would you stay and help him heal, or walk away before your heart got involved? I'd love to read your thoughts. Morning crept into the mansion like a secret. Soft light spilled across the glass windows, illuminating a house too big for one man's silence. Ethan Ward sat in his chair, hands still, gaze distant. To anyone watching, he looked the same, fragile, motionless, pitiful. But under the blanket draped across his lap, his legs were strong again. Each muscle had learned to listen, to obey. He could walk now. Not perfectly, not for long, but enough. The lie was almost over. Only one more truth needed to be revealed. Naomi arrived as she always did, quietly, gracefully, with warmth that seemed to soften even the cold walls around him. She greeted him with her usual calm smile, unaware of the storm brewing in his chest. He had begun to look forward to her voice, her stories, the way she filled silence with something meaningful. Sometimes she spoke of her mother back in Georgia, of church Sundays, of the little community garden she volunteered at after work. Sometimes, she said nothing, and that silence felt like peace. But Ethan had started to notice something else. When Naomi smiled at him, his heart didn't just feel comfort, it felt alive. He tried to bury it. Tried to remind himself that she was an employee, that this was wrong, that love couldn't grow from deception. But emotions don't ask for permission. They bloom where truth lives. And Naomi's presence had become his truth. One afternoon, as autumn rain whispered against the windows, Ethan decided it was time. He couldn't keep her in the dark any longer. Not her. He waited until she entered the study with her usual care, a tray of tea, a soft hum on her lips. Then, slowly, he rose from the chair. Naomi froze. Her hands trembled, but her eyes, wide and stunned, held no fear. Only awe. Ethan's voice was low, rough from the weight of confession. I can walk. For a long moment, she said nothing. The rain filled the silence between them, steady and forgiving. Then, she nodded slowly. I knew, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I've seen the strength in you for weeks. I was just waiting for you to see it too. Her words disarmed him. All the explanations he had prepared, the apologies, the justifications, vanished. There was only the quiet truth between them, pure and unspoken. For the first time in years, Ethan felt small in a good way. Humbled. Human. Seen. But the peace of that moment didn't last. Because Isabella returned that evening, glowing from another event, unaware that everything was about to change. She entered the room, heels clicking like gunfire, lips parted in surprise when she saw Ethan standing. The mask of concern she had worn for months slipped instantly. Her face hardened, her voice sharp. You've been lying to me? Ethan didn't flinch. He met her gaze calmly, the strength in his spine steady and quiet. I needed to know who was here for me, and who was here for the name I carried. Isabella's eyes darted between him and Naomi, her mouth twisting. So this is what it's been about? Her. Naomi stepped back, her hands raised slightly, voice trembling but firm. No, ma'am. It's not like that. I only. But Isabella's laugh cut through her words. A sharp, bitter sound that filled the room like shattering glass. Of course it's like that. Look at you. Playing the angel, getting close while he's weak. You think you're special? The cruelty in her tone struck Naomi harder than any slap could. But she stood her ground, eyes glistening, chin lifted. No, ma'am, she said softly. I just cared. Ethan stepped forward then, his voice iron-wrapped emotion. That's more than you ever did. The words silenced the room. For a moment, even Isabella seemed unsure how to breathe. Then she turned, fury masking humiliation. You'll regret this, Ethan. Everything we built. He cut her off gently. What we built was never real. And with that, she was gone, her heels echoing through the hallway like fading thunder. Naomi stood frozen, her heart pounding. She hadn't meant for any of this. She had simply cared for a man who was hurting, never expecting anything in return. But now, standing before him, watching the walls of his old life crumble, she realized something dangerous. Her feelings had grown roots. And Ethan, he felt the same. In the weeks that followed, the mansion changed. The energy shifted. Gone were the cold silences and brittle laughter. Naomi stayed on, at his request, though she insisted she didn't want to be paid extra. She helped him rebuild his strength, encouraged him to walk outside again, to feel sunlight and real air. Sometimes they walked together in the gardens, his hand brushing hers by accident, the touch lingering a moment too long. Their bond deepened in ways neither dared to name. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was something purer, slower, like dawn before sunrise. But one evening, as they watched the city lights flicker from the balcony, Naomi's voice broke the quiet. "You shouldn't have to hide your healing anymore," she said softly. "The world deserves to see you stand again." Ethan looked at her, at the woman who had shown him what love without agenda felt like, and realized she was right. He had tested love and found truth. Now it was time to live it. But the world doesn't forgive easily, not when money, lies, and pride are involved. Word spread quickly that Ethan Ward had miraculously recovered. Reporters swarmed the gates. Headlines questioned everything: the accident, the relationship, the fiancée's disappearance. And somewhere in that noise, the story twisted. Naomi became the target. Rumors spread that she seduced him, that she manipulated him, that she was after his fortune. Ethan watched it unfold with growing fury. He had created this test to expose false love, but now, it was punishing the only person who had ever been true. He made a choice that night, one that would cost him his reputation, but save something far greater. He would tell the world the truth. All of it. Because for once in his life, he wanted love without shadows. And Naomi deserved to be seen in the light. If you were Ethan, would you risk your name and everything you built to defend someone who saved your soul? Or would you let the world believe its lies? The truth has a way of finding light, no matter how tightly it's buried. And for Ethan Ward, that light came in the form of a press conference he never planned to hold. The morning was gray, heavy with rain. Reporters gathered at the gates of the Ward estate, cameras flashing like lightning. They had come for scandal, not truth. But Ethan was done hiding. He stood before them, no longer in his wheelchair. No longer pretending. A man reclaimed. His voice carried through the static of microphones and whispered questions. "Yes," he began, steady and calm, "I pretended to be paralyzed." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Flashbulbs erupted. He waited, unshaken. "I did it," he continued, "to understand the world around me, to see who cared when the money, the power, and the image were stripped away. And I learned that love, the kind that doesn't fade under pressure, doesn't come from wealth or fame. It comes from truth." He paused, scanning the faces before him, curious, hungry, skeptical. Then he said her name. Naomi Carter. The sound of it silenced the noise. She was my housekeeper. But more than that, she was the only person who treated me like I was still human. She didn't know I could walk again, yet she stayed. She prayed for me. She believed in me. And I won't let the world destroy the purity of that. Reporters shouted questions, a storm of voices, accusations, and disbelief. But Ethan didn't flinch. He had lived his entire life behind armor. Now, he stood exposed, and somehow, freer than ever. When he stepped back into the mansion, the silence hit him hard. Naomi stood by the staircase, eyes wide with disbelief. She had watched the press conference from the television in the kitchen. Her voice trembled. "You didn't have to do that, Ethan." He stepped closer, his tone soft but firm. "I did. Because the world needed to know the truth, not about me, but about you." Naomi shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "They'll twist it. They'll turn it into something ugly. They always do." He reached out, fingers brushing her hand, grounding her. "Then let them. I'd rather face lies beside someone honest than live in truth beside someone fake." For a moment, they just stood there, two souls battered by the weight of exposure, yet bound by something stronger than fear. But peace didn't come easily. By evening, the internet was aflame. Videos, headlines, gossip, all dissecting their story. Some called it a fairy tale. Others, a scandal. And Naomi became the headline she never wanted to be. Billionaire's maid or manipulator, the talk shows asked. They replayed clips of her walking to the grocery store, turned her quiet dignity into spectacle. People who didn't know her judged her anyway. Ethan watched it unfold with growing anger. But Naomi, she refused to hide. I won't let them change who I am, she said quietly one night. She sat on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket, eyes fixed on the horizon. I've worked my whole life with my hands, with honesty. If they can't see that, it's their blindness, not my shame. Ethan sat beside her, feeling both awe and sorrow. He had caused this storm, and she was the only one standing calm within it. Days passed, then weeks. The world moved on, as it always does, chasing the next story. But something deeper shifted inside Ethan. He began to rebuild not just his company, but his purpose. He quietly funded rehabilitation centers, anonymous donations that helped those who couldn't afford treatment. He stepped away from the empire that had once owned him, giving more time to the simple places Naomi loved, the garden, the community, the kind of world that didn't care about last names. Still, despite their growing closeness, a hesitation lingered between them. Ethan wanted to tell her how he felt, that her kindness had redefined love for him. But every time he tried, guilt stopped him. He had lied to her. Used her goodness as part of a test. And though she forgave easily, he couldn't forgive himself as quickly. One evening, he found her in the garden, kneeling by a bed of lilies she'd planted weeks ago. The scent filled the air, soft and pure. Ethan knelt beside her, the damp soil pressing into his palms. Naomi, he said quietly, when I pretended to be paralyzed, I thought I was testing others. But really, I was testing myself, and I failed. I don't deserve your kindness. Naomi looked up at him, eyes reflecting the fading light. You were broken, Ethan. We all do foolish things when we're broken. What matters is what we do after. Her forgiveness hit him harder than anger ever could. It humbled him in ways money never could have. He reached for her hand, his fingers trembling slightly. I don't know what I can offer you, he said, voice barely steady. But I know I can't imagine my life without you in it. Naomi's lips parted, her breath catching. She didn't speak right away, just looked at him with that quiet, searching gaze that had always seen more than he could say. Then, slowly, she smiled. Then stop imagining, she whispered. It wasn't a confession shouted to the skies. It was something softer, deeper, a promise built in the ruins of pretense. That night, as the city slept beyond the hills, Ethan finally felt what peace tasted like. Not luxury. Not applause. Just truth, raw, human, and shared. But fate wasn't done testing them yet. A letter arrived the next morning. From Isabella. Written in elegant script, it carried an apology he didn't expect. She admitted her greed, her fear, her anger. She confessed that losing him had made her realize how hollow her own life had become. At the end, she wrote a single line that lingered in his mind long after he finished reading. Sometimes, love doesn't fail, it just reveals who we really are. Ethan folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. He didn't hate her anymore. He pitied her. Because he now knew the difference between possession and love, and she never would. He looked across the garden, where Naomi was laughing with the housekeeper's daughter, her joy untainted by the world's noise. And for the first time in his life, he didn't just feel successful. He felt whole. Love isn't proven by what we say, it's proven by what remains after the lies fall away. What do you feel in this moment, heartbreak, hope, or both? Share it below. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as can ever imagine. so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.